Warning: watch this video or you will regret it. Grandma, I told you, didn't you hear me? Why are you turning up the TV so loud? The neighbors are calling. Mom and Dad, go get your ears checked. You're not answering when you call. Perhaps all of us have heard or said these things when living with an older person. Hearing loss is a very common condition in the elderly, and because it is so common, many people consider it an inevitable part of the aging process, not worth worrying about. But is that really true? The truth is, hearing loss is not simply a matter of old age, poor hearing. It can be a sign of a serious medical condition that can have a profound impact on quality of life, mental health, and even the risk of cognitive decline in the elderly. Why are the elderly susceptible to hearing loss? Hearing loss in the elderly, also known as presbycusis, is a process of hearing loss that occurs slowly and silently with age. According to statistics, about 1/3 of people over 65 years old and more than 50% of people over 75 years old experience this condition. But why is that? The first cause is due to the natural degeneration of the auditory system. In the elderly, the tiny hair cells in the cochlea, which are responsible for transmitting sound to the brain, are damaged over time. When these cells die, they cannot regenerate, leading to gradual hearing loss. In addition, the ear nerves also weaken, causing the ability to process sound to become slow and disordered. The second is the cumulative effect of noise. Throughout life, the human ear is constantly exposed to loud sounds such as machinery, vehicles, televisions, radios, or even music headphones. Noise damage does not happen immediately, but over decades, it will erode the ability to hear silently without us even knowing it. Another important cause is underlying medical conditions and medications. Elderly people often suffer from diseases such as diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or kidney failure, all of which can damage the small blood vessels in the inner ear. In addition, many drugs used to treat cardiovascular disease, cancer, strong antibiotics, etc., are also toxic to the auditory nerve if used for a long time. Finally, genetics and lifestyle also play a role. Some people have genetic factors that make them more susceptible to presbycusis. Meanwhile, smoking, drinking, poor nutrition, and lack of exercise also accelerate the process of hearing loss. Warning signs of hearing loss in the elderly. One of the things that makes hearing loss dangerous is that it comes on very slowly, is very mild, and is easily overlooked. Elderly people often do not realize that their hearing is declining or try to hide it for fear of being seen as old and weak, troublesome. Meanwhile, relatives also easily assume that grandparents and parents are just hearing poorly due to age and ignore important signs. Here are typical signs of early warning of hearing loss. Frequently asking others to repeat. Older people often ask, "Huh? What did you say?" Speak up, especially in noisy environments or when talking on the phone. Turn on the TV or radio too loud. If your grandparents often turn on the TV at a volume that makes the whole family deaf, it could be a sign that they are not hearing as well as usual. Difficulty hearing when there are many voices at the same time. People with hearing loss often have difficulty distinguishing sounds in noisy environments. For example, when sitting in a restaurant, in a crowd, or even at a family meal. Not hearing clearly female or children's voices. These are high-frequency sounds, and hearing loss often begins in this frequency range. That is why older people often miss what their children and grandchildren say. Avoiding social interactions. Because of hearing loss, they tend to withdraw from conversations, become less talkative and quieter. This can be mistaken for signs of depression. Sadly, these symptoms are often overlooked. Relatives think that it's because of old age, while those involved are self-conscious and afraid to admit that they cannot hear clearly. They do not know that late detection not only makes the disease worse, but also increases the risk of memory loss, dementia, and depression in the elderly. Serious consequences if hearing loss is not treated early. Hearing loss is not simply not hearing clearly. If hearing loss is not detected and treated promptly, it can lead to a series of serious physical, mental, and social consequences, especially in the elderly. First, losing connection with the world around them. When they cannot hear clearly, the elderly gradually withdraw from communication. They are afraid to talk, do not participate in the stories of their children and grandchildren, do not want to go out to meet friends. Over time, the feeling of isolation and abandonment becomes constant. This leads to depression, anxiety, and a marked decline in quality of life. Second, it affects memory and cognitive ability. Many studies show that elderly people with hearing loss are at higher risk of dementia, including Alzheimer's. The reason is that when the ear no longer transmits sound clearly, the brain will have to struggle to understand, causing the brain areas related to memory to be affected. Hearing and the brain, which seem to be two separate things, are actually closely linked. Third, loss of safety in daily life. When the elderly cannot hear clearly the fire alarm, the sound of vehicles, the voice of people calling, etc., they are very susceptible to accidents in daily life. The risk of falling, traffic accidents, or even being taken advantage of by criminals also increases significantly. Fourth, the effectiveness of other medical treatments is reduced. A person who cannot hear the doctor's instructions clearly, does not understand the correct instructions for taking medication or test results, will clearly have difficulty in taking care of their overall health. That is why hearing loss can indirectly affect all aspects of medical treatment. And finally, hearing loss also deeply affects family relationships. When the elderly cannot hear clearly, their children and grandchildren easily become angry and impatient, causing conflicts and misunderstandings to arise. Gradually, the gap between generations becomes wider, not only because of poor hearing, but because of neglected hearts. Hearing loss. Don't let old age be an excuse. Hearing loss in the elderly is not just a sign of aging. It is a serious medical problem that directly affects the quality of life, spirit, and even intellectual health of the elderly. Unfortunately, many people still consider this inevitable, then silently accept living in silence, isolation, and misunderstanding. But we, the children and grandchildren, can change that. Listen to the small signs, take your grandparents and parents for regular hearing checks, and don't hesitate to use hearing aids or modern support solutions. Because just hearing clearly once again, the elderly's smiles will be much brighter. Hearing is not simply hearing, it is the door for them to continue to connect, love, and live fully. Don't let invisible silence take that away.